Usually, we're told not to compare ourselves to other people because comparison can bring up negative feelings like jealousy, bitterness, anxiety, or questions about our own self worth. And I agree, comparison can do that. But I also think comparison can be incredibly useful if you can use it to learn rather than judge yourself. I had about 15 minutes in the car on my drive home after dropping my kids off at summer camp this week. And I was looking for something interesting to listen to, something to kind of spark some inspiration and help me focus on, decide what to focus on next for my content. And opened up YouTube. I found a Mel Robbins podcast called 8 Things to Tell Yourself Every Morning. And I thought, perfect. I've been wanting to get to know her content a little bit better, and maybe it'll kind of help steer me in some direction for my content, my own content this week. I saw it was about an hour long, which is definitely more time than I had, but I figured maybe I could just get the gist pretty quickly. Now, what was interesting is that even after just a few minutes, I was finding myself getting so frustrated. It was kind of weird. I was like, why am I getting frustrated? But typical me, I don't really just be like, I don't like this and I turn it off. I get really curious about why. What I found myself struggling with was that I wasn't frustrated because I disagreed with her. I actually agreed with pretty much everything she was saying about positive mindset, being intentional about the story you tell yourself, directing your attention to what you want to notice and pay more attention to. And she was doing a lot of things well. It was organized, professional, clear. She brought in research and examples. Her whole demeanor was approachable. Lots of things I aspire to do in my own video content someday, and I'm working towards that. So why, though, was I so frustrated and so quickly? And I was thinking about it, and one of the first things she suggests is essentially starting your day with a mantra and telling yourself, today is going to be a great day. And for me, I don't have any problem with that. I think there's huge power in positive psychology, the narrative that you tell yourself. I think the problem was that I understood that. I was convinced within about 10 seconds. And then she just kept going on and on and on, explaining it from like every which angle, the neuroscience behind it, and this is why it works, and this is how you apply it, and this is how it shows up for, I don't know, it felt like 10 more minutes. Like, I appreciate the evidence. And I guess if I was encountering it for the first time, like I was 10 years ago, that would be hugely useful. It just wasn't where I was when I was listening to this. And that distinction matters. It's not necessarily that the content is bad or Mel Robbins is bad. It's not that I'm better or worse. It's just that the depth, the length, the type of explanation weren't a good fit for what I needed that morning. So here's how this came about for me. But for me, it wasn't enough that I knew this video didn't resonate with me. It wasn't enough that it, I understood that it was because she was explaining something for far too long, something that I already was convinced of. My frustration was surprising to me. And so therefore, I wanted to learn something from it and help inform and deepen my own understanding of myself. So I got disciplined about it. I wrote down what works and what doesn't for me around this video. So the things that worked, right? Like I love the positive mindset focus. I love that she backs it up by evidence. I love her overall demeanor, how she looks, how approachable she seems. She's organized. But what didn't work for me were the lengthy explanations of ideas that I've already internalized. If it was brand new, maybe I needed that, but that wasn't what I needed that day. For me, I don't respond well to, I think she does it really well, but there's a lot of advice out there on the internet that says follow these 3 quick tips and I will transform your life. It's so easy. And I know some people love it and it is exactly what they need. It just doesn't work for me because I think the nuances of life are way more complex. And what might work for me one day doesn't work for me another day. So for somebody to imply that you should do this every single morning, and I promise you that if you do, your life will be phenomenal, as good as mine. I don't know. It's hard for me to buy into. It's just not what works for me. Maybe I need to give her more of a chance because I don't know her very well. And I might change my mind someday. That's okay too. And what I realized, and what I'm hoping to demonstrate, is that all of my reactions, especially the surprising ones, are data. Really, really useful data. Not truth, not a conclusion, not a something that will be true for in every situation and every day of my life. But it's interesting because if it surprised me, there's probably something I didn't actually know well enough about myself yet. Something worth investigating. And I love that now I can articulate better why, with great detail and multiple levels of reasoning, why that video didn't work for me. I might totally change my mind in a week or in a year. And that's okay, but that's why it didn't work for me that day. And then I had almost the exact opposite reaction to another video I watched recently that was based off of Brene Brown's work. I found myself wanting to pause, rewind, take notes. I couldn't take notes fast enough. And again, I could have just concluded this was better. But instead, it was better for me. And I wanted to understand why at a really deep level. Why am I leaning in here when similar content about, more effective ways to lead yourself from Mel Robbins, that particular video didn't resonate with me? Why did this one resonate? Even when I had questions about the veracity of the source. As I reflected, I realized, yes, okay, it's a topic I enjoy about clear boundaries. But what I noticed that it got specific really fast. It talked about toxic people and then defined what they did or what the impact was on me. So immediately expanded my knowledge on what I even thought about toxic people. That was really interesting. It drew me in. For me, it felt really dense in the content, so I just couldn't go fast enough. I had to slow down, and it's forget about multitasking. I really just need to pay attention, otherwise I'm going to miss something important. And what was interesting is even when I went back to go listen to it again, I was I did still miss things, and that was really cool. That was really interesting. And there were lots of specific examples. It wasn't just a philosophy, hold a boundary and act upon it, but it was, and go do this. If you let people talk terribly to you and you say that you're not okay with it, but you let them, well, yeah, that they're going to keep doing that. They're not, you have to establish your own boundary and act upon it and enforce it. But the parts that, even with this video that I found myself super fascinated by, there's still things I don't really like. That doesn't really work for me. I think that I am still really questioning whether this is actually Brene Brown. I couldn't find if it was actually from an actual talk. It seemed like it was inspired by AI and uses her voice, which I have a lot of mixed feelings around. And then there was a couple specific viewpoints that I didn't agree with. This video said that, you don't ever have to explain your boundary. You don't owe that to anyone because then you're asking for permission. And I don't know that I agree with that. I think that a boundary can be non-negotiable by communicating about it and helping other people understand your boundary, helping yourself understand your boundary even better. I think it's super powerful. But I can agree with 80% of the video and appreciate it, and just maybe 10, 20% wasn't really for me. Totally okay. And now I know why. Okay, so what? I've now spent all this time noticing my reactions, comparing two different pieces of video content, and getting more specific about what works for me and what doesn't, and why. But does it really matter? In this case, yes, because it shaped how I formed this video that you're watching right now. That frustrating video actually sparked me to experiment with video content in the first place. And once I got clearer about what works for me, I could then be more strategic about where I invested my limited time and energy. So here's what it means for me with regards to video content creation right now. On the green, where I just want to run with it, just go. And just like, don't second guess, just go. I'm going to try to experiment more with video. I've gotten feedback in the past that I'm pretty natural and authentic on camera. And so video might be a particularly good fit for how I communicate nuance and complexity. In the yellow column, where I'm not really sure, but I'm going to try to experiment with, I'm going to learn enough video editing to make my videos better, but not so much that learning video production is the project itself. Content over polish for me at this point. On the red, where, things I'm still curious about, but I don't have room for that right now. I've heard TikTok is really interesting and maybe I'll explore it eventually. But right now, the learning curve is just too steep, relative to the likely return, so not now. The people I coach, there's far more demands on them than their limited time and energy. We have to make trade-off decisions. And one way to do that is to think about the return on your investment. And that's completely subjective, completely personal to you. And this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about, how to turn reactions, patterns, and experiences into useful information that you can actually make decisions with. And honestly, that's a huge part of what authentic leadership means to me. I don't really believe in some simple 3-step framework that if you just do this every day, your life will all of a sudden become amazing. I think you probably have a handful of authentic leadership values that are very personal to you, that hold true across different situations and even across decades of your life. But how those values actually show up can be incredibly specific to the situation you're in. And I think that part of authentic leadership is building and continually refining your own playbook to get clearer about what matters most to you and what doesn't, what works for you and why. And that's actually what I did in this example. I had an emotion that I wasn't expecting, frustration. Instead of just dismissing it as, I don't like this, I got curious about why. I got more specific about the context. What exactly am I reacting to? In this case, video content. And then I spent some time articulating what I actually responded well to, what I didn't, and why. And finally, I used that information to make a real decision about how I want to invest my limited time and energy in content creation this week. And that's the part that matters to me. Not just understanding yourself better. That's great, but so what? It's about using what you learn about yourself to make better decisions that work for you. So the next time you catch yourself comparing yourself to somebody else, or you have an emotion that just surprises you, maybe don't immediately ask or assume what's wrong with me. Why am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this. Instead, think about and get curious about what's this comparison teaching me about myself? And then do something with that answer. And if it's something you're interested in exploring, I'd love to hear from you. Don't compare to judge yourself. Compare to learn.